Hey, good morning everybody on the internet. This is Blind Justice coming to you live on the streets of Aberdeen. I'm sitting outside of City Hall once again.
Donations?
What's that?
Are you taking donations?
No, I'm just protesting some of the stuff the city's been doing.
Okay, all right. You sure?
Yeah, thank you though.
Okay, thank you.
You have a great day.
What are you protesting about? People sitting on the sidewalk?
Yeah.
That's illegal.
Yeah.
You know that, right?
Yeah.
When's the place they tell people they can't sit on the sidewalk? When's the place where time that's going out?
That's right. That's right. That's why we're protesting it.
Okay, here's how to see what spot you guys can look at.
Yeah, I've got a card you can take. There you go. Thank you. Have a great day. All right. So, let's see. The title today is "Work?" ? And that was fun. Somebody came out and just wanted to know what we're doing, and it's like, oh yeah, you're right. They can't do that. That's unconstitutional. So, all right. So work, and that's another thing. Like the word rest that gets confused. People think, well, to rest you have to have been working really hard to rest. And that's not true. And then likewise, people confuse the word work or job as meaning something that you have to do for money or for payment. When, what about kids? Kids growing up, they work around the house, they do stuff, pick up after themselves, or help clean up the house, or set the table, or help with meals, or help with watching their little siblings, help do the yard. And some people pay for them for that, but if they're not paid, is it still work? Of course it's still work. It's labor. It's something you do with your hands, not necessarily with your have to have hands, but something you do with your body, some effort that you put into doing something. There's mental work, so there's even work that you can do that's not physical, right? But it's an effort, I guess, is really to boil it down. It's something that takes an effort to do, and it's a doing, right? So it's a verb involved there. So thinking is still a verb, even though it may not be a physically intense work. Some people can be. Some people get stressed out. They allow their thinking to stress them out, and then they have physical ailments because of it. They worry themselves to death, literally. So just some of the other areas of work that, there's volunteer work. There's not a paid position. And then there's something when people talk about skin in the game, right? This is a term that I've heard a few times in the last 62 days. Well, we want to know how much skin in the game they got. How much have they invested into this? And usually when people are using those terms, they're speaking monetarily. They're speaking and with the framework that work has to be predicated on money, on some kind of currency or some kind of exchange of goods. When there's no requirement for that, for it to be work, or for someone to be truly concerned about something, they don't have to have any kind of monetary investment in it. And just because somebody does have monetary investment doesn't necessarily mean they have, quote, more skin in the game. They do if they're using that paradigm that work has to be associated with money, but not if it's associated with an effort, right? And there's also, people have talked about, a volunteer workforce versus a paid workforce. And a lot of people believe that, well, the paid workforce to have more incentive to do a better job and to do this or that. And it's like, well, actually, the volunteer workforce are doing it not for the money. They're not doing it for a different reason. They're doing it just for doing it, for the sake of doing it, right? So that's actually backwards. The volunteer workforce actually has more invested into it because they're investing their time and effort, which some people would calculate as being money, right? And they're not getting anything monetarily out of it. They're investing it as they're doing it. So, for instance, you can take, and not to pick on different professions or anything, but you can take, let's say, the medical profession, right? And say, well, is there a conflict of interest in the medical profession if it's a paid position? Some could argue yes, there is a conflict of interest, because especially you see that playing out in the quote healthcare system in America, where people get charged for every little thing, right? The provider, the healthcare provider, bills everything they can bill, typically, and even if it's not used on a patient, if it's just simply opened, or even if it was just pulled from a shelf, it gets billed, and then it gets used later for training or for whatever. Even not even going to that patient. It's pulled from the shelf, scan it to that guy's number, and it shows up on their bill. So there's this split, or this struggle, anytime that there's money involved, like you're getting paid something to do something. It's, well, are you doing it for the sake of doing it? Are you doing it because you want to do it, because you think it's going to be a benefit to others, or to the community, or to yourself? Or are you doing it for that and money? And if there's an and in there, then it's a slippery slope, because sometimes that and becomes the primary one. The money becomes the primary motivator and the primary factor. You're not doing it just for the well-being or for the benefit of others or for self. It becomes, oh, I got to get money for whatever reason, or I want more money for status or whatever reason. And then the altruistic motivation becomes secondary or tertiary, or just falls off. It's back there in the, maybe it was the initial motivation for going into the field, but then the dollar signs started getting bigger, right? So the same thing with the clergy. So there's another profession where that's pretty obvious. And that one, if you're talking about specifically in the Christian, realm, you go to the New Testament, and Jesus says, you can't serve God and money. So there's a struggle for people to understand what work is, because of the upbringing and the understanding that we've been taught for so long, is that it's got to be an exchange, it's got to be a monetary gain involved, and that's just not the case. There's plenty of other ways to work, to put forth an effort that isn't predicated on money, even down the road, because some people volunteer. For instance, you do an internship, it's an unpaid position, and then you learn a skill set, and you show your worth, you show you're a good worker or whatever, and then hope to get hired on later to then maybe make money, right? So there's that model as well. But that one is still dangling money as a carrot down the road. They're just in front of you. Keep going and maybe you'll get paid. Which is basically what every job is anyway, that's predicated on money, is a carrot. You have to do a good job, not just for the sake of doing a job, but for the sake of getting a reward, of getting carrot, or punishment, to avoid punishment. And it's basically the same thing, reward and punishment. It's just motivators that are unnecessary. If you're going to do something, you can do it for the sake of doing it, finding the benefit in that thing. And if you can't find it beneficial, then don't do it. So, yeah, just some thoughts on work, what it is, what it isn't, and hopefully find ways of doing work today, putting forth an effort, in the way that we've just defined and understood it as an effort, and you can analyze whether it's beneficial or not. If you before doing it. And while doing it, and then afterwards. You can always reassess, like, I thought this was going to be beneficial, but it turned out it really wasn't. So, alright. Peace and love to you guys, and enjoy your day. And, as always, Deo Crestfully Bear.